It was me. I thought it. For the longest time, I played Assassin's Creed games claiming I wanted more and more realism in them, criticized whenever they steered away from it, and praised whenever they seemed to be going back to it. But looking back and thinking about it, saying Assassin's Creed was once realistic and that now it isn't is kind of fucking weird. Saying realistic is always good and non-realistic is bad is also, in my opinion, extremely strange. And this video is more just kind of sobering myself up from these claims that I just randomly threw out and trying to understand truly what I meant by it. In this video, I want to revise those beliefs that I had, how AC was never that realistic, and why realism isn't always a good thing. But first, I want to dispel a common sentence used in the Assassin's Creed interwebs whenever criticizing the modern games. You're always going to see someone claiming that Assassin's Creed 1 removed their crossbow because it wasn't historically accurate, and how now we have monsters and myths in our Assassin's Creed. But that's not even the case. The crossbow in Assassin's Creed 1 was removed because it made the game too easy, not because it wasn't historically accurate. And that, I think, sums up the point of this video, which is the way we remember old Assassin's Creed is usually not very accurate to what it actually is, and saying that it used to be incredibly realistic is a disservice to the clever game mechanics that allowed us to feel more like an assassin despite their lack of realism. So, what on earth do we mean when we say Assassin's Creed used to be realistic? At what point during your impossible ledge grabs, jumping into bales of hay from tall towers, blending in with prostitutes while wearing a bright white hooded outfit, summoning the Kraken when exploring secret tombs under cathedrals, using metallic objects that can control minds and look into the future, talking to advanced civilizations that project themselves in holograms, relive memories of ancestors through a matrix machine, flying as an eagle in Assassin's Creed 3, driving in tanks in Brotherhood, setting a port on fire and killing thousands of people inside a large cave in Revelations, wielding 2 swords, 4 guns, and killing 300 guards without breaking a sweat in Black Flag, diving and doing flips on the side of a cathedral in Unity, did we ever stop and say, yeah, this is pretty realistic? It's clear that calling AC realistic, or judging it based on its realism, is a bit of a silly thing to do. And I'm the first to admit that I would throw the word around like it's nothing, especially comparing it to the newer games and using it as a point of criticism to explain why those games aren't as good. More realism good, less realism bad, right? Well, as you already saw, a lot of the mechanics that makes AC amazing, the superhuman parkour, the leaps of faith, the running around with a tiny wrist blade, hiding in plain sight, none of that is all that believable and realistic, yet we can all agree that those things are great and it's what made AC so unique. Likewise, are we so sure that realism in the newer games isn't present and that if it is, it's always a good thing? Take Assassin's Creed Valhalla for example. The parkour in that game is slow, cumbersome, and boring. Eivor moves with great struggle, taking her time to run across ropes or mantle onto rooftops. When you play, you feel like she's literally this big, cumbersome Viking carrying tons of heavy armor and weapons. Because she is. The movement in Valhalla is realistic for Eivor, and yet, for me, it's one of the worst parts of the game as a whole. On the other side of that coin, look at Assassin's Creed Origins, one of the newer games as well. Slowing down time to shoot arrows mid-air, like you're in Max Payne, or controlling a sniper arrow with your mind is not particularly realistic, and yet for me, the bow mechanics are one of the best and freshest features in that game. So what's really going on? Are we just looking for something to complain about? Well, yes, we're Assassin's Creed fans, it's our favorite thing to do. But also no. See, the more I think about the word realism, the more I think the word we actually wanted is believability. Games who insert realism for its own sake usually suffer for it, and grounded games who insert more fantastical stuff that is actually fun to do will often benefit from it. What I think determines how that unrealistic thing is received is if it's consistent with the promised or sought after fantasy the player wants. When I play as an assassin, being given the tools to act like one, often in a near superhuman fashion like Eagle Vision or the Leap of Faith, I'm willing and able to believe that my character could do that because A, it falls in line with the previously established and communicated lore, B, it stays consistent with that lore and doesn't contradict it in later installments, and C, most importantly, it helps bring that fantasy alive. All that crazy parkour, the stealth, hiding in plain sight, it all fills those 3 conditions over and over again. It's why things like having Medusa in AC Odyssey fell so flat with some fans. No matter what you think of the Isu lore, having random monsters show up casually is not in line with any of the previously established lore. It makes new lore and retcons things to make it fit. So it doesn't fulfill either A or B because it contradicts the lore. Same thing as having 2 playable protagonists just because the DNA got mixed up, whatever the fuck that means. And it doesn't even do C, because it doesn't fuel the desired player fantasy that players who don't like these games want. Of course, there are people who love AC Odyssey and love having Medusa in AC Odyssey, but it's not from people who want that assassin fantasy that we used to get and be told where we're gonna get in Assassin's Creed. For me, it gets even more interesting when we look at the controversial mechanics in Assassin's Creed, because I think that AC Odyssey, especially in my region of the AC community, has kind of agreed to be creatively a little bit misguided when it comes to the additions it made, and I also think that we all agree that the mechanics that aren't realistic in Assassin's Creed from the older ones are still great mechanics. But when it gets to controversial mechanics, for example, the assassin focus in AC Mirage, it gets very interesting because that mechanic has its lovers and it has its haters. Everyone agrees that it's not realistic, especially with the canon explanation the devs gave when they were marketing the game. But many players don't care that it's not realistic because it helps fuel the assassin fantasy, and arguably it doesn't necessarily contradict the established rules of assassins doing superhuman things. So from the players who love it, it seems like it satisfies all three conditions, A, B, and C. For some people it does, for some people it doesn't, and that's why it's controversial. But for the people who don't care that it's not realistic, it's because it fuels and fulfills that assassin fantasy without retconning anything in the lore. Also, let's look at some of the realistic things in the older games that people do hate, like tailing missions. That's a very believable thing that an assassin would do, but people hate those missions. Autofail missions are also a thing that people hate. If an assassin gets caught in a mission, he would die automatically and fail the mission, and if he didn't die, the target would escape anyways when they sound the alarm. So it's honestly realistic for the mission to fail if you get detected when you're supposed to be in stealth. But we hate those things because first of all, it's frustrating, and also because it's taking away from our power fantasy rather than adding to it. Now, of course, for all these examples, there are people who love the things I criticized and hate the things I praised. But this is the general sentiment in the more old-school oriented segment of the AC community, which is why I encourage all of you to help me determine what it truly means when we say we want realism back. Do we want better dialogue that feels more human even if they're talking about sci-fi pieces of Eden? Do we want darker tones even if there's no specific or realistic reason as to why a certain time period in history can't be more lively? Do we want better voice actors even though they might not be from the region of the game that it's set in, therefore making it slightly less realistic? Do we want fall damage? And if so, why don't we want fall damage when we're jumping into a bale of hay from 300 meters up? Does better parkour even exist if our character wasn't able to eject and back eject off of walls that they would never be able to do so in real life? I have no idea. My best guess is that believability is the key. What players who seek a certain fantasy are willing to believe, as long as the suspension of disbelief is an aid of the fantasy and not against it. But these are just my thoughts, and I know that a lot of these mechanics are pretty controversial. Funnily enough, I made a video about controversial AC mechanics that you can watch right now.